Hi everyone, will be starting at 12:55 sharp. So till then, please hold on. We'll be starting in just less than 4 minutes. All right, less than 1 minute till we start. Yep. Okay, I think we can start. Okay, Nels, you can take it off.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the fourth episode of our cultural podcast, which is part of UMISA's iWeek series. Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Naz, and I'll be your host for this week. So, today we'll be having a conversation about a country that is very close to us on the map and a country which we also share a very intimate history with. Yes, that's right. We'll be talking about Singapore today. And we'll be having a conversation with Akil, who is a third year student from the Faculty of Islamic Studies. So, Akil, where is Singapore?
Hi, hi everyone. So Singapore is located at the southern tip of Malaysia, at the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula.
I heard that Singapore is also referred to as the Little Red Dot. Why is that?
Yes. So how the term Little Red Dot came about is, um, it was said by Indonesia's former president B.J. Habibie during an interview where he said that, look at this map. All the green area is Indonesia and the red dot is Singapore. So he was trying to compare the size of both countries. And if you can see in the map, Singapore is just a little dot in the map. Yeah.
I see. That's very interesting. So, the word Singapore itself seems like a very interesting name for a country. So, where did the name of Singapore come from?
Okay, so Singapore in the past was not called Singapore. Initially, it was known as Temasek, but before that, it was called Pulau Ujong, which means island at the end, because like I said, Singapore was located at the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula. But not many people knew that name, and actually I didn't know about it too, because we were taught that Singapore was called Temasek. And how Singapore got its name was, there was a prince from the Srivijayan Empire. His name was Sang Nila Utama, who went hunting in the island of Bintan, in the southern part of Singapore. So when he saw an island with a white sandy beach, he was curious about this island. So he asked his chief minister what, if he knew about this island, and he decided to make a trip to this island. And when they finally arrived, he saw a strange animal. So he asked his chief minister what this animal was, and he replied it was a lion. Therefore, he named the island Singapura, which means lion in Sanskrit. Lion, Singa is lion in Sanskrit, Pura is city. But the funny thing is, lions don't exist in Singapore. What he saw was actually a tiger. Yeah.
Actually, as a Singaporean myself, This is my first time hearing that Pulau Hujung is the ancient name of Singapore. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's a new fact for me.
that kind
So
of, yeah, there was a joke. What if Sang Nila Utama saw another animal which was not a lion? It would have been something really funny. But luckily he thought he saw a lion.
yeah, so it was a good mistake.
Yeah.
Or not will be named something
Anything else, yeah.
really weird. So so that was one of like the stories that Singapore has in regards to like the founding of Singapore. Are there any other folk tales that Singaporeans have?
Yeah, actually, there's a few, but I can share a few, maybe two. Okay, so the first story is about when Singapore was infested with swordfish, you know, which would attack anyone near the shores. So during this time, many villagers and fishermen were afraid to go near the sea and had to even call the army to ward off these swordfish. But it did not manage to get rid of this problem. So eventually, a young boy named Hang Nadim came up with a plan and proposed it to the Sultan or the king at the time. And his plan was to build a wall made of banana tree trunks along the coast. And when the swordfish beaks or their bills would pierce the trunks and would get stuck to it, that would be the perfect moment for the army to kill the swordfish. And eventually this plan worked, and he became a popular figure among the villagers. And his name was Hang Nadim. Okay, actually this story was made into a movie, and I've seen the movie. And to continue the story, the prime minister during that time felt jealous of the boy's intelligence, because at such a young age, how can this boy manage to solve the country's problem? So he was feeling jealous, envious, and he told the Sultan that one day this boy might take his place as Sultan. So the Sultan was obviously afraid, and they came up with a plan to kill the boy. Okay, and one night the prime minister managed to get into Hang Nadim's house, the boy's house, on top of a hill, and eventually killed the boy. This happened. This led to his blood being flown down the hill and covered the whole area until it became red. And from then on, this place was called Bukit Merah in Malay, which means red hill, due to the soil being red. Yeah, so this place still exists in Singapore. Yeah, that's one of the story. Another story is about Badang. Okay, there is this man called Badang. He was going out fishing, and he caught a genie in his fishing net. And the genie agreed to grant Badang one wish in exchange for his release. So Badang asked to make him strong, and the genie told him to eat his vomit, which he eventually did, and he became strong. And his strength actually caught the attention of the king and other kings from other countries. And one of them was the king in India, which sent one of his strongest men to challenge Badang. So this challenge was to lift a large rock, and Badang managed to do it, and he threw it towards the Singapore River. So the large rock managed to stay at the mouth of the Singapore River for a long time. And as time passed by, there were people who wrote on the rocks, and inscriptions were made. And during the time of the British, they managed to find this rock, and they tried to decipher the rock, but did not manage to understand the language, because it was written in a very old language, and it's believed to be written in Kawi, a language from the islands of Java and Bali, if I'm not mistaken. Even Sir Stamford Raffles, the modern the founder of modern Singapore, tried to decipher the inscription, but he did not manage to do it. So they eventually blew up this large rock to make to widen the passage at the Singapore River, and some smaller fragments were saved. And these stones were called the Singapore Stone, and it can be found at the National Museum of Singapore. And it has been designated as one of the 11 national treasures of Singapore. Yeah.
So do these stone fragments still contain like the inscriptions?
Yes. There are still inscriptions on the stones, but nobody managed to decipher it up until now.
Oh, that's really interesting. I heard about the Bukit Merah story, but I've never heard about the Singapore Stone story.
Yeah, I didn't know about the Singapore Stone, which still exists until this day. Yeah, so I managed to research about it, and I found out that it's being displayed at the National Museum.
So, since we're talking about the history of Singapore, and we know that Singapore is located near Malaysia, how does the history of Singapore and Malaysia meet? Is there any overlap between the history of Malaysia and Singapore?
Yeah, actually, Singapore was once part of Malaysia, and it was, if I'm not wrong, the Federation of Malaysia before Singapore gained independence. Okay, so the term was called merger. It happened in 1963 when we were part of Malaysia, but we were actually kicked out of Malaysia to become an independent state in 1945. Yeah. And actually, University of Malaya was also in Singapore in the first place before it became two different institutions, one in Singapore and one in Malaysia. So the one in Singapore was called the National University of Singapore, or NUS, and the one in Malaysia is called University of Malaya. Yeah.
Just to correct you, Akil, in the past we used to be called Federation of Malaya.
Malaya. Malaya. Yes.
So it's really interesting to see how Singapore and Malaysia, we share such a close history to each other, and even till today, NUS is actually considered the best university in Singapore, and then UM is also considered the best university in Malaysia. So both of us have really developed in our adult stage.
True. Yeah, and yesterday the QS ranking came out, and UM was ranked 9th best uni in Asia. Yeah, and Singapore NUS was ranked first, I think. Yeah. So it's good to see that both universities are doing well in Asia.
Yeah, agree. So let's talk a little bit about Singapore today. How does Singapore look like today? How is the ethnic makeup of Singapore? What's the languages that are spoken in Singapore?
Okay. So basically, Singapore is made up of 4 ethnic groups, which is the Chinese, Malay, Indian, and others, with the Chinese making up the majority. And the languages, there are 4 official languages: Chinese, Malay, Tamil, and English. Okay. And most Singaporeans speak English, but Malay is the national language, but we use English in our everyday life. And living in Singapore, you can see that these different races and different religions interact in our diverse community. Even our neighbors are from different race and different religious backgrounds. And in Singapore, majority of us live in HDB flats, And what's so special about our multicultural society is that I don't think we can see it in anywhere else. We are very connected to each other, and I'll share with you an interesting fact. In our HDB flats, the government has set a maximum or a maximum percentage of ethnic groups that can live in the flat. For example, 70 to 80% of Chinese can live in a flat, around 20% Malays, and 10% Indians. So this makes sure that there isn't any formation of racial enclaves, and it promotes racial integration in Singapore by allowing residents of different races and religions to live together and interact on a regular basis with each other. Yeah.
It's actually interesting that you mentioned about the quota system in Singapore. Since Singapore has a very diverse range of ethnicities, are there any other laws that helps to maintain the racial harmony among Singaporeans?
Laws, I think I'm aware of that. If I'm not wrong, there's a law which protects minorities, especially in their workplace, where if someone faces any kind of discrimination, they may make a complaint to the authorities and make sure that those who are in the wrong will be dealt with. Yeah, that's one of the laws that I can remember. Yeah.
Are there any festivals that the different races share?
Yeah. So in school, students are in schools we celebrate this celebration called Racial Harmony Day. It happens on the 21st of July every year, and there's a story behind this celebration. There was a racial riot which happened in Singapore back in 1964 between the Chinese and Malay community. So it happened when the Malay Muslim community held a procession to celebrate the Prophet Muhammad's birthday, and during this procession, a clash happened between the Malay and Chinese bystanders. So this violence spread island-wide, and it resulted in people dying and many more injured. So it serves as a lesson for us, and this celebration was celebrated in schools to teach the students that social division weakens society, which is what we don't want to happen in Singapore, because we are made of many different races and religion. So during this celebration, students wears different traditional costume. It could be from their own traditional costume or from another race, and it could be the baju kurung, the sari, the cheongsam, and some of the students can actually borrow their friend's costume. And there will be booths teaching students about the various practices of various cultures, and they are introduced to traditional games and food. And from this, we learn to respect each other despite the differences that we have. Yeah. Other than that, during in schools, we have excursions to different locations in Singapore, like Chinatown, which is for the Chinese, Little India for the Indians, and Kampung Glam for the Malays. Okay, so we visit these different places to learn more about the culture, and also we visit different places of worship to learn more about the practices, and like I said, to respect each other. And I feel that Singaporeans are very fortunate to live in a society that's made up of people from different races and religions, and being able to live harmoniously. And I think that is what makes Singaporeans or Singapore more special. Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of Racial Harmony Day, that brings back a lot of good memories. It's a very interesting day where people you can see Chinese people wearing saris,
Yeah.
Indian people wearing the cheongsam.
True.
Yeah, so it's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, what about like the food in Singapore? Are there like any unique food that is very special about Singapore?
Food, yes, there is. There's two. First, it's the Hainanese chicken rice. It's made into Singapore's national dish, and the chili crab. Both are recognized as Singapore's national dish. Yeah, I think the Hainanese chicken rice can be found anywhere in Singapore, especially in hawker centers. Okay, no matter what race you are from, everybody will eat it. Whether you're Malay, Chinese, or Indian, I think we all love the chicken rice in Singapore. And the chili crab, it's a very popular seafood dish among locals and even foreigners. When you ask foreigners about chili crab, they will most likely know that it's one of the favorite food in Singapore. And last year during UmiChef, we sold chili crab pasta. Yeah, because we are trying to show that it's one of Singapore's national dish. Yeah.
Wow, chili crab pasta. I miss that. I miss UmiCaf
Okay.
actually. I
Uh,
was
okay.
I had lessons on that day, so that's why
Okay.
I miss UmiCaf. But yeah, I would have loved to try some.
Yeah, maybe we can make some in the future.
Yes, please. So, are there any like food that is because like Singapore and Malaysia are like so close to each other? Are there any food that is like that you can find in both Singapore and Malaysia, or any food that is like that is you can find in both places but are different in their own ways?
I think both countries have similar food. For example, nasi lemak, or roti prata. In Singapore, we call it roti prata, but in Malaysia, we call it roti canai. Yeah, it's the differences in names, but I think they have the same taste. Yeah, so there's not much difference. Yeah, there's a lot of food that is similar in Malaysia and Singapore. So I think it's easy to find in both countries. Yeah, it's just the name of the dish that might be different because I experienced it in Malaysia when I was with my friends, and there was a plate of epok-epok or curry puff. Like in Singapore, we call it epok-epok, and I asked them, can you pass me those epok-epok? And they were like, huh, what? I said epok-epok. Then they were like, oh no, it's called curry puff. I said, oh okay. So yeah, it's just the name of the food or the dishes that's different. And the other things are just the same, yeah.
So, Akil, we have a question from the chat. Swarab asks, what language is spoken in the parliament?
In the parliament, English is spoken, yeah. It's used in schools, in offices, yeah, English is used.
And Akil, another person named Akil, asks, is it true that most people in Singapore eat at hawker stalls rather than cook at home?
Yeah, it's true. You can see that people would rather buy from hawker centers than cooking their own food at home because most Singaporeans are busy with work, with school, and they would just uh, buy food from the hawker centers rather than to spend more time at home after a long day to cook their own food. So I think that's one of the cultures that is present in Singapore. Yeah.
So, so what are like the common? How common are hawker centers in Singapore? Like, how often do you see them?
In every neighborhood, there will be a lot of hawker centers. You can find them easily in every neighborhood. So, they will be selling different type of dishes from the Malay community, from the Chinese, from the Indian, and it's very common to find one hawker center selling different types of food from different races. Yeah, it's very common in Singapore.
So hawker centers must be like a very popular place among the Singaporeans.
Yeah.
It's like a place where everyone from the neighborhood just comes together.
Yes, especially the elderly. You can see them maybe drinking coffee or tea. Yeah, that's one of the places that we like to spend with each other. Yeah.
I see. So, going back to the languages spoken in Singapore, you mentioned that we speak English. Are there any like other like dialects that Singaporeans speak?
Yeah, actually in Singapore we have our very own version of English called Singlish. So it's Singapore English. Basically, it's a mixture of English, Chinese, and Malay words. Okay, so but this language is discouraged by the government because they prefer standard English, and there was even a Speak Good English campaign where the government saw the need to speak good English as they worry that Singlish might become Singapore's common language. But there were also those who defended the use of Singlish in our society. They say that Singlish is what allows us to identify ourselves as Singaporeans, which I have to agree because only Singaporeans will understand English, and I'm very sure that foreigners will have a very hard time to understand. So, surprisingly enough, there were quite a few Singlish words that were added into the Oxford Dictionary last year, and there were like about 19 words. That's quite a lot. Okay, and I find it very interesting that these words were included in the dictionary, even though it's not a formal kind of English. It's added into the dictionary. Yeah.
So it's safe to say that Singaporeans will still be speaking Singlish lah.
Yeah, you use the word lah. Yeah, that's one of the words that we use.
Yeah. Yeah. So Singlish is a very like interesting dialect that Singaporeans share, and it kind of like reflects our culture in a way because like Singaporeans are, Singapore is made up of so many different ethnicities, so many different races, and it reflects in our Singlish language because Singlish dialect because like the dialect Singlish itself has like a lot of different words that come from different ethnicities.
True. Yeah. It shows that there is a integration between these different races, and we can come up with a new type of English. Yeah.
True. And it's also really interesting, like you mentioned that in the Oxford Dictionary, even they recognize our language.
Yeah. Yep.
So, are there any other like facts about Singapore that you'd like to share with the audience?
I think one of the questions you asked was for me to describe Singapore. So maybe I can add that maybe Singapore is more is known as a fine city where it has very strict laws. So every small mistakes might end you up with might make you in trouble or might get you fined. Example for littering. Singapore is also known as a very clean country. Yeah.
So we have another question about hawker centers. How has the COVID? Sorry. Hello.
Okay.
Yeah. So how has the COVID pandemic affected the hawker centers in Singapore?
They are very much affected because some of the shops had to close, but I think they might still be able to continue with their business because there's a lot of food delivery services such as GrabFood or Food Panda, but I'm sure the customers, they are not able to get the number of customers like they used to get. So I think they are obviously affected, and it's not just the hawker centers but also the home-based businesses as well, because their health factors are affected as well. Yeah.
And out of curiosity, like how has the COVID pandemic affected like the way that we celebrate our cultural festivals?
It's very different this year. Of course, we are not able to meet our family members. We are not allowed to visit each other's houses because there's a restriction of meeting people where you cannot gather together, and there's a maximum of number of people when you meet. I think it was 5. Yeah, so this year the way we celebrated our celebration was through online, yeah, through Zoom or Google Meet. Yeah, we would still get dressed in our traditional costumes, but through online. Yeah.
I'm sure that's similar to a lot of other countries as well. The COVID pandemic has really affected like the way that we celebrate our festivals, where normally we would meet, but now we can't. We have another question from Akil again. What's your favorite cultural food from Singapore?
My favorite would be the Hokkien Mee. Yeah, I really like that a lot. And apart from that, it's the chicken rice. Yeah, I really like the chicken rice. It's one of my favorite food. And if you could let me eat one food throughout my whole life, I think it would be the chicken rice. Yeah.
Yeah, the chicken rice is it's a very unique dish as well. It just tastes very different in Singapore. So yeah, I have to agree with you. Chicken rice is also my favorite food.
Okay.
So I guess that's all we have for today. Thank you so much, Akil, for taking the time to sit down and talk to us about Singapore.
Okay, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, once again for tuning in to our podcast. I'm sure we have learned a lot about many different countries through this past 4 days. We'll also be having another podcast tomorrow at the exact same time and place at 1 p.m. tomorrow. So do make sure to tune in to our podcast tomorrow. And we'll also be having a folktale sharing session today at 7 p.m. So make sure to tune in to that as well. It'll be on Microsoft Teams. And don't forget to check our social media for all the updates regarding iWeek and other upcoming events by UNISA. So thank you guys and see you.